Young and New says, how to find the right woman to get married. I long for a woman to build with and live life together. I want to hear God more and do what he wants from me. The thing is, the more that you dwell on this idea, then that individual will not come. So the number one thing you have to do is assess, why do I want this wife so bad? Because it could be that you want this woman more than you want God. And anytime you want something more than God, you start delaying the process. You start pushing that thing being delivered even more. So you got to get to the root of your heart and say, okay, why do I want a wife so bad? Why do I want the right woman and all these type of things? Because when you begin to dwell on these things and the thing is, you can't wait to hear God. You got to work on what God last said. If you're waiting on if you're waiting on God to say something new and you haven't worked on what he's already told you to work on, you're never going to hear what you're waiting on. And it's only going to make you even more bothered by God, upset by God, because if the only time you spend time with God, and some people do this, they'll spend a lot of time with God because they want to hear from God. So they'll read their Bible, they'll pray, they'll serve their church, and they're using that, quote unquote, as a manipulative tool to see if that will cause God, that's works righteousness. Because I did, God, you owe me an answer. But God, I've been faithful to you, so you owe me an answer. God, I've been serving you, so you owe me this answer. And what that does is that goes directly against the true character of God, and then it will actually reveal your character. It will reveal that you don't even love God. You only want God for what you want from God. And so that you got to see your heart. Because if you're concerned about a wife, if you're ready for a wife, there's nothing wrong with that. But we don't want your spiritual disciplines to not lead to spiritual development. If all your if your spiritual disciplines is solely because you want a spiritual delivery, then you will never have spiritual development. What that means is, if all I'm doing is praying, reading, fasting, all this stuff is for a spiritual delivery to happen from God, so that's works righteousness. But if my spiritual discipline should not be for spiritual deliveries, my spiritual discipline should be for spiritual development, so that I can actually match the spiritual delivery. So if you want God to deliver a spiritual, wholesome, God-fearing wife, then you can't even focus on her right now. I wouldn't even think about her right now. I would just solely focus on incorporating spiritual awarenesses, I'm spiritually aware of who I am to God. I'm spiritually aware of my assignment of God. I'm spiritually aware of God's love for me. Then I do these spiritual disciplines because it's part of sanctification, because I want to spiritually develop so I can match the spiritual delivery. But if you're doing all of these different things wanting to hear from God, then you won't hear from God, because the Bible says when you pray to consume of your own lust. You pray amiss. You're just praying just to receive things, to gobble it up with your own lust. So that could mean that if God gave you your wife right now and she is the thing that you deem to complete you, then you're going to gobble her up. And you're going to tear her apart. You're going to put God expectation on her. That's why you have to be healed in order to hold. You have to be whole in order to hold. And so what I don't want to happen is that you're only doing these different things to hear from God. He says, I want to hear God more and do what he wants from me. Then the real reason that you do that is solely not about a wife, so that you can increase in your life, so that your life can match your wife and your wife can match your life, and y'all can both be rooted in the one that gives the abundance to life, who is Christ, right? And so don't worry about how to find the right woman to get married. That woman will find you. That sounds counterproductive, but when you're following God, you will find your wife along the way. Let me make sure I make that clear. When you're following God, your wife will find you. See, I'm telling you, I told someone the other day, there was about a year or so between I made this declaration and this change in my mind until my wife came in my life. There was a time in my singleness where I was like, you know what? Every woman I choose, I lose. So I gave up. I said, you know what, God, I'm not going to worry about my wife anymore. It's tearing me apart. And I said, I'm just going to focus on what you want me to do. A year later, my wife comes. I'm not saying that will be the time frame for you, because I don't want my story to be well, you did it for Josh. Now, my story may be a little different. But what I'm saying is that you got to be in a place in your life where you're not even thinking about your wife. You got to get to a place in your singleness where you're not even thinking. Because when you think too much in your singleness about your wife or about your husband, then you won't find no growth in you. So the thing is, you said, I long for a woman to build with. That's the thing. That could be an idol. Whatever you long for will determine what you do. You long for me. Now you gotta look at the word long. Why do I long for her? Is it because you're not happy with what you're building? Could it be that you have some things in your life that you feel that she will complete you? Like because you have to be completed in Christ before you can even compliment a wife, right? And so you have to look at that second sentence is what you got to focus, because that's your heart, bro. You said, I long for a wife. Why do you long for her? Do you long for her more than you long for God? The only thing we should long for is God. I'm telling you, in order for things to last long, the only one we should long for is God. In order for that thing to last long, we got to long for him, more of him, reveal more of you to me so I can become more of myself, so I can be more to the person that I have in my life. And you got to say, okay, because if you're longing for a woman to build and live life together, you have to ask yourself this question. What am I building now? Because if you wait to build, you won't have anything to build. What I mean by that is you got to lay the foundation in your life. She has to lay the foundation in her life. God has to. And then y'all can build together. And so you got to say, okay, what have I built in my singleness? In order to build a strong marriage, you got to say, what have I built? Like, for instance, man, I'm not trying to use me as an example. I'm not, hear me. But I learned this principle. There's a lot of things that I built in my singleness that's keeping the air on, that's keeping the lights on in my marriage. There's some things I built in my singleness that is keeping my wife smiling. You see what I'm saying? There's things that I built, that God built in my life so that I can build with my wife. You have to be built to build. A builder with no arms, a builder without no arms, a builder without no legs can't build a building. You have to be whole. You have to be built to build. So you got to find the real root reason why you're longing for a woman, because that will determine how long you will meet your woman. Because if you long for her more than you long for God, then you're going to settle for the wrong one, and then you're really going to have some troubles, my friend.